For years, I believed my father was my protector. Growing up in suburban Chicago, life felt like a Hallmark movie. You know the type where everything is picture perfect, even the messy parts. Mom would burn the cookies, and we'd laugh about it. Dad would come home from coaching football, his whistle still hanging around his neck. And I'd be there, caught in the middle of all that love, thinking I was the luckiest girl in the world. That's what makes this story so hard to tell. Because when you grow up believing in fairy tales, you never expect to become the villain's victim. I remember every detail of our old house on Maple Street. The creaky third step that I'd always skip when sneaking down for midnight snacks. The way sunlight would filter through Mom's lace curtains, creating patterns on the hardwood floors. The smell of coffee and vanilla that seemed permanently embedded in our kitchen walls. Mom Linda Mitchell was the kind of mother other kids envied. She knew exactly how to make everything better, whether it was a scraped knee or a broken heart. Her laugh could fill a room, and her hugs felt like coming home. She volunteered at every school event, knew all my friends' names, and somehow managed to make even burnt cookies taste amazing. Dad Robert Mitchell was the hometown hero. Head coach at Lincoln High, leading the team to state championships 3 years running. Everyone knew Coach Mitchell. He was firm but fair, tough but kind. The kind of man who'd give you his jacket if you were cold, then lecture you about forgetting yours in the first place. I used to love watching him during games, pacing the sidelines, that determined look on his face. He'd always find me in the stands and give me a quick wink, our secret signal that meant I love you. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Friday nights were for football games and hot chocolate in the bleachers. Saturdays were for sleeping in and pancake breakfasts that lasted until noon. Sundays were for church, followed by movie marathons where Mom would always burn the popcorn. I had friends, good grades, and dreams of becoming a journalist. Everything made sense. Until it didn't. Mom's diagnosis came during my sophomore year. Stage 4 ovarian cancer, the words fell like bombs in our pristine living room. I remember the way Dad's hands shook when he held the initial paperwork. The way Mom's smile never wavered even as she said, "Well, looks like we've got a fight ahead of us." She was always the strong one. 8 months. That's how long we had from diagnosis to goodbye. 8 months of hospital visits and hope turning to heartbreak. 8 months of watching the strongest woman I knew fade away like a photograph left in the sun. I learned to be strong during those months. I learned to hide my tears behind homework and fake smiles. I learned to cook dinner when Mom couldn't get out of bed. I learned to help her to the bathroom and she was too weak to walk. I learned to be the daughter she needed me to be. Dad changed during those months too. His shoulders seemed to carry more weight. His eyes lost their spark. His famous pep talks became shorter, his patience thinner. But he was still Dad, still my protector. Or so I thought. Mom died on a Tuesday in April. The irony wasn't lost on me. Spring, the season of new beginnings, became our season of endings. She went peacefully, they said. Dad and I were holding her hands. Her last words were, "Take care of each other." If only she knew what that would come to mean. The funeral was a blur of black dresses and casseroles. Everyone said how sorry they were, how Linda was such a wonderful person. As if we didn't know that already. As if their words could fill the void she left behind. Dad took a leave of absence from coaching. I went back to school after a week, because that's what Mom would have wanted. Life went on, but everything felt wrong. Like someone had shifted all the furniture in our house 2 inches to the left. Everything looked the same but felt different. the first changes were subtle. Dad started drinking more, nothing obvious at first. A beer with dinner became 3. 3 became a 6-pack. Then came the whiskey. He'd sit in his recliner, staring at Mom's empty spot on the couch. Sometimes he'd cry. Sometimes he'd tell stories about when they first met. Sometimes he'd just sit in silence, and those were the scariest times. I tried to be what he needed. I cooked dinner every night, just like Mom used to. I kept my grades up, joined more clubs, tried to give him things to be proud of. I even learned to make cookies from Mom's recipe, though they were never quite as good. "You're so much like her," he'd say, watching me in the kitchen. At first, the words felt like a compliment. Later, they'd feel like a curse. The first time he touched me inappropriately, I convinced myself it was an accident. A hand lingering too long on my shoulder. A hug that felt different from before. The way his eyes would follow me around the room. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself it was grief making me paranoid. I told myself a lot of things that weren't true. The night everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I was doing homework on the couch, half watching The Voice on TV. Dad had been drinking, but not more than usual. He sat down next to me, closer than normal. "You look so much like her," he said, his voice thick with something I couldn't identify. His hand found my knee. I remember feeling frozen, like those dreams where you try to run but can't move. When he kissed me, he tasted like whiskey and tears. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I couldn't understand how my protector had become my predator. Afterward, he cried. He apologized. He said he missed Mom so much. He said I reminded him of her. He said it would never happen again. I believed him because I needed to. I believed him because the alternative was too horrible to contemplate. I believed him because he was all I had left. But it did happen again. And again. And again. Each time, there were more excuses, more tears, more promises. Each time, I retreated further into myself. My straight A's became my shield. My extracurricular activities became my escape. I learned to move silently through our house. I learned which floorboards creaked and which didn't. I learned to sleep with one eye open. I learned to hate the sound of his footsteps in the hallway. At school, I was Sarah Mitchell, star student, future valedictorian. At home, I was someone else entirely. Someone I didn't recognize. Someone I couldn't look at in the mirror. My friends noticed changes but didn't know how to ask. How could they? How do you ask someone if their father, the beloved Coach Mitchell, is hurting them? How do you tell someone that your home has become your prison? How do you explain that the person who's supposed to protect you is the one you need protection from? So I smiled and made excuses. I was busy with college applications. I was tired from studying. I was still grieving Mom. All true, but none of them the real truth. Then Karen came into our lives. She was a guidance counselor at a neighboring school. Pretty, kind, with a laugh that reminded me a little of Mom's. When Dad started dating her, I felt hope for the first time in months. Maybe this would fix things. Maybe she would make him normal again. Maybe I could stop being afraid in my own home. For a while, it seemed to work. Dad spent more time with Karen. The drinking lessened. The nighttime visits stopped. I started to breathe easier. I started to believe in safety again. I was wrong. Karen wasn't my savior. She was just another player in Dad's twisted game. The first time they came to my room together, I thought I was having a nightmare. But nightmares end when you wake up. This was just beginning. Karen would hold my hand and whisper that it was okay. That this was how families loved each other. That I was special. That I was chosen. I learned then that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like guidance counselors with kind smiles. Sometimes they look like fathers who coach football. Sometimes they look like the people who are supposed to help you. I started planning my escape during my senior year. College applications became my lottery tickets to freedom. Every acceptance letter felt like a key to a locked door. Northwestern University, just far enough to require living on campus, close enough to avoid suspicion. I saved every dollar I could from my part-time job at the library. I created a separate email account they didn't know about. I packed an emergency bag and hid it in my closet. I learned to survive by planning to escape. But survival came with a cost. Every fake smile felt like a betrayal to myself. Every time I called him Dad felt like swallowing glass. Every time I sat through dinner with them felt like drowning. But I did it. I smiled. I called him Dad. I ate dinner. I survived. Because that's what Mom taught me, to be strong. Though I don't think this is what she meant when she said take care of each other. I don't think she could have imagined this version of our lives. I don't think she would recognize the people we've become. Sometimes, late at night, I talk to her. I tell her I'm sorry I couldn't be stronger. I tell her I miss her. I tell her I need her. But she never answers. And I'm left alone with the sound of footsteps in the hallway. With the creak of my bedroom door. With the weight of secrets too heavy to carry. With the knowledge that sometimes the monsters don't hide under your bed. Sometimes they sleep down the hall. Sometimes they wear your father's face. And sometimes they break you in ways that can't be fixed with burnt cookies and Sunday movies. But this isn't the end of my story. This is just the beginning. Because even in the darkest nights, I held on to one truth. I am Sarah Mitchell. I am my mother's daughter. And I will find my way out of this darkness. Even if I have to burn down everything to do it. College acceptance letters arrived like lifeboats in a storm. Northwestern's thick envelope felt heavy with promise in my hands. Dad was proud his little girl getting into a prestigious university. If only he knew I'd chosen it for its dorms, not its reputation. For its distance, not its programs. For its promise of escape, not education. The summer before college stretched endless before me. Each day was a countdown, marked carefully in my hidden journal. 90 days until freedom. 89. 88. Dad and Karen celebrated my acceptance with a special dinner. They bought champagne, called it a family celebration. I spent the entire meal fighting back nausea. Their version of family was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Move-in day couldn't come fast enough. I packed my life into cardboard boxes, each one a step closer to freedom. Dad insisted on helping me move. Karen came too, playing the role of supportive almost stepmom. My new dorm room was tiny, with mint green walls and a window overlooking the quad. It was the most beautiful space I'd ever seen. Because it was mine. Because it had a lock. Because it was far from him. My roommate hadn't arrived yet when they left. Dad hugged me too long, as always. Karen kissed my cheek and slipped me some spending money. I watched them drive away, feeling hollow and full at the same time. That's when I met Ashley. She quite literally crashed into my life, dropping 3 boxes of art supplies in the hallway. Her hair was dyed electric blue at the tips. She wore combat boots with a sundress. She smiled like someone who had never known darkness. "Hey, I'm Ashley Chin. Looks like we're neighbors." She lived in the room next door. She was an art major with dreams of becoming an animator. She talked too fast and laughed too loud. She was everything I wasn't. She was exactly what I needed. Ashley didn't ask why I flinched when people moved too quickly. She didn't question why I never went home on weekends. She just existed beside me, bright and constant as a star. We fell into an easy friendship. Late-night study sessions in the library. Coffee runs between classes. Pizza and movie marathons in her room. For the first time since Mom died, I felt normal. Or something close to it. But Dad wouldn't let go that easily. The calls came daily at first. Then the unexpected visits. "Just checking on my girl," he'd say. Each visit left me shaking. Each call made me sick. Ashley noticed, of course. She noticed everything. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" she'd say. But I couldn't. The words stuck in my throat like thorns. How do you tell someone that your father? That the man who raised you? That the coach everyone admires? I couldn't. So I didn't. Instead, I threw myself into college life. I joined the school newspaper. I took extra classes. I stayed busy because busy meant safe. Busy meant distracted. Busy meant less time to remember. But memories have a way of finding you. They hide in the spaces between moments. In the dark before sleep. In the silence between heartbeats. Dad's visits became more frequent as winter approached. He'd show up unannounced, always with gifts. Always with that look in his eyes. The one that made me feel 11 again. Small. Trapped. Powerless. Karen came with him sometimes. She'd bring cookies that weren't burnt. She'd ask about my classes. She'd play normal so well it hurt. Ashley started noticing patterns. The way I'd disappear when they visited. The way I'd shake afterward. The way I'd stop eating for days. She started staying closer. Making excuses to be around when they came. Creating buffer zones of safety with her presence. One night, after they left, I broke down. Ashley found me in the communal bathroom. Sitting on the floor. Trying to scrub away feelings that wouldn't wash off. She sat down beside me. Didn't touch me. Just sat there. "Whatever it is," she said, "you don't deserve it." I started crying harder. "You don't know," I whispered. "You don't know what I've let happen." She looked at me then, really looked at me. "Let happen? Or had happened to you?" The distinction broke something in me. Words started pouring out. About Mom. About Dad. About Karen. About everything. Ashley listened. She didn't run. She didn't judge. She just listened. When I finished, she took my hand. It was the first touch that hadn't felt like a threat in years. "You're not alone anymore," she said. And for the first time, I believed it. But telling the truth has consequence. CES. Ashley wanted me to go to the police. To tell someone official. To make it stop. I wasn't ready. The thought of everyone knowing. Of the headlines. Of the whispers. I couldn't. Not yet. So we made a plan. I would tell Dad I needed space, that I was too busy for visits, that I needed to focus on school. It almost worked. For 2 blessed months, he stayed away. Called less. Gave me room to breathe. I started sleeping through the night. Started eating regularly again. Started feeling almost human. Ashley and I grew closer. She taught me to paint. I taught her to write. We stayed up late talking about everything and nothing. She made me feel safe. She made me feel seen. She made me feel worth saving. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late, almost midnight. I was alone in my room, studying for finals. Ashley was at an art show. I heard his voice in the hallway, talking to my RA, saying he was worried about me, saying he needed to check on his daughter. The door opened before I could lock it. He was drunk. Karen wasn't with him. "You've been avoiding me," he said. His words slurred together. His eyes weren't Dad's eyes anymore. They were the eyes of the monster under my bed. "I miss you, baby girl." I backed away. Hit the desk. Knocked over my lamp. The room went dark. What happened next? I still can't write it all down. Can't put it into words. Can't make it real by naming it. But when he finally left, when I could breathe again, when I could move, I grabbed my emergency bag. The one I'd packed months ago. The one I'd prayed I'd never need. And I ran. Past the concerned RA. Past the sleeping security guard. Past everything I'd tried to build here. I ran until I reached Ashley's art show. She took one look at me and knew. She didn't ask questions. She just grabbed her keys. Took my hand. Led me to her car. We drove all night. No destination in mind. Just away. Away from him. Away from the memories. Away from the girl I used to be. When the sun rose, we were in Michigan. Ashley's aunt had a lake house there. Empty during the off-season. Safe. For 3 days, I didn't speak. I just sat by the window. Watching the waves. Trying to remember how to exist. Ashley never left my side. She brought me tea. She wrapped me in blankets. She kept the darkness at bay. On the 4th day, I opened my laptop. And I started to write. Everything. Every detail. Every memory. Every truth I'd hidden for so long. I wrote until my fingers cramped. Until my eyes burned. Until the words ran dry. Then I hit publish. Posted it anonymously on a survivors forum. Watched as the comments started rolling in. "Me too. I understand. You're not alone." Each response was a tiny light in the darkness. Each voice joined mine. Each story helped carry the weight. And slowly, very slowly, I began to feel stronger. Not healed. Not fixed. But steady. Ringier. Ashley read every comment with me. Held my hand through the hard ones. Celebrated the hopeful ones. Reminded me I was more than my story. More than what he'd done to me. More than the secrets I'd carried. She helped me find a therapist. Someone who specialized in trauma. Someone who didn't flinch at the truth. Someone who helped me understand. It was never my fault. I was never to blame. I was a child. He was the parent. He was the one who broke everything. Not me. Never me. The blog post went viral. Other survivors shared it, added their voices, built a chorus of truth. And somewhere in that chorus, I found my strength again, found my voice, found my way back to myself. But this time I wasn't alone. This time I had Ashley. This time I had an army of survivors behind me. This time I was ready to fight back. Because sometimes the only way out of darkness is to light it up yourself and watch it burn. The police came on a Tuesday. Just like the Tuesday Mom died. Just like the Tuesday everything changed. Maybe Tuesdays were just meant to reshape my world. They were gentle, which surprised me. 2 female detectives, their badges catching the morning light. They'd seen my blog post. Others had come forward. I wasn't the only one. That knowledge broke me and healed me all at once. Ashley sat beside me as I gave my statement. Her hand in mine, anchoring me to the present. Every detail they needed to know. Every moment I tried to forget. Every truth I'd hidden for so long. They recorded everything. My voice shook less than I expected. Maybe because I wasn't that scared girl anymore. Maybe because I finally understood. This was his shame to carry, not mine. The arrest made local headlines. Respected coach arrested on multiple charges. Community leader faces serious allegations. Former students come forward. Karen was arrested too. She knew. She helped. She was just as guilty. The school rallied around me. Professors extended deadlines. Classmates formed protective circles. Even strangers sent messages of support. But the hardest part was yet to come. The trial. Months of preparation. Hours of testimony. Days of reliving everything. Ashley never left my side. She sat in the courtroom every day. Drew sketches of the proceedings. Helped me breathe through panic attacks. The defense tried to break me. Asked about my grades. My behavior. My choices. As if any of that mattered. As if any of that made it okay. But I stood firm. I told my truth. I looked him in the eye. I didn't break. The verdict came after 3 days of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. 25 years without parole. Karen got 15. Justice, they called it. But justice feels hollow when you're rebuilding yourself from scratch. When you're learning to trust again. When you're trying to remember who you were before. The reporters wanted interviews. Wanted to tell my story. Wanted to make me a symbol. I turned them all down. My story wasn't finished yet. I wasn't ready to be anyone's symbol. I just wanted to be Sarah again. The healing came slowly. Like spring after a long winter. Little bits of green pushing through frozen ground. I started sleeping through the night sometimes. Started laughing without feeling guilty. Started planning for a future I could believe in. Ashley and I moved into an apartment off campus. A small place with big windows. Filled with her artwork and my books. No shadows lurking in the corners. No monsters down the hall. Just safety. Just peace. Just us. I changed my major to psychology. Wanted to understand. Wanted to help others. Wanted to turn my pain into purpose. The survivors group I started met every Thursday. in a quiet room at the Women's Center. We shared stories, shared tears, shared hope. Some days were harder than others. Some memories wouldn't fade. Some scars wouldn't heal. But I learned to carry them differently. Not as weights, but as witnesses to my strength. Ashley taught me to paint my feelings. Big, messy canvases full of color. Red for anger. Blue for sadness. Yellow for hope. Each painting a step toward healing. Each stroke a reclaiming of my body. Each color a piece of my story. Mom's birthday was the hardest. I visited her grave for the first time since everything. Brought her favorite flowers. Told her everything. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner," I whispered. "I'm sorry I couldn't stop him. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger." The wind rustled the trees above me. Like she was answering. Like she was saying I had nothing to be sorry for. Like she was proud of who I'd become. Graduation came faster than expected. For years of growth. For years of healing. For years of becoming. Ashley's blue hair was now purple. She'd become a successful freelance artist. Her work hanging in local galleries. Her smile still bright as ever. I graduated summa cum laude. Gave a speech about resilience. About rising from ashes. About finding light in darkness. My survivors group came to cheer me on. Their faces in the crowd gave me strength. Their presence reminded me I wasn't alone anymore. The acceptance letter from graduate school felt different. Not an escape this time, but a choice. A step forward. I was going to become a trauma counselor. Help others find their voice. Help others reclaim their stories. Help others survive. Ashley decided to come with me. "Someone has to make sure you remember to eat," she said. But we both knew it was more than that. We'd built something together. Something strong. Something real. Something worth protecting. The night before we left for our new life, I sat down to write one last blog post. Not about pain this time, but about hope. About survival. About love. To everyone still carrying secrets, I wrote. To everyone still afraid to SP. Eek. To everyone still learning to trust. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are not your story. You are so much more. And somewhere out there, someone is waiting to help you carry the weight. Someone is waiting to show you the light. Someone is waiting to remind you the darkness doesn't last forever. And neither does silence. Speak your truth. Find your voice. Build your army. And remember, you were never meant to carry this alone. I looked at Ashley, asleep on our couch. At the boxes packed for our move. At the life we'd built from broken pieces. And for the first time in years, I felt completely, utterly free. Not because the past was erased. Not because the pain was gone. But because I'd learned the most important truth. Survival isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering who you are. Despite everything. Because of everything. And choosing to live anyway. This is my story. Not of victimhood. But of victory. Not of darkness. But of dawn. Not of silence. But of speaking. And it's still being written. Every day. Every moment. Every breath. Because that's what survivors do. We keep living. We keep loving. We keep fighting. We keep winning. One day at a time. One truth at a time. One step at a time. Until we find our way home. To ourselves. To each other. To hope. End.